The chapter 5, he called in the book, he called it trigger events, things that made people say, that's it, I'm done with Christianity. So these aren't all of them, but these are some of the major ones. And so I really want to hear what some of your responses might be to that. So the first one was pretty obvious. It always comes up number one on the list. If people are asked, if you could ask God one question, what would it be? Pain and suffering. Lee Strobel had a book called The Case for Faith, and he sent out a questionnaire to a lot of people, and this was the number one question that people wanted to deal with. So we need to know some ways that we can handle that. I would just suggest there are plenty of good books. It's not like Christians have no answers. There have been wonderful books written. The first one there, If God is Good, that's Randy Alcorn. He wrote a book about heaven, really popular book. This one is equally good. Where's God When It Hurts? Hope When You're Hurting. And then this one here, The Walking with God, that's Tim Keller. So if you like any of Tim Keller's material. You know Tim? You know some of his work? Yeah. The Case for Faith. Now, the whole book, Case for Faith, doesn't deal just with this issue, but it has a really powerful chapter. And there's a DVD that covers it in more depth. It talks about, I won't take too much time on this, but it talks about a guy who had a tremendous loss in his life. It's just one chapter, but it's so powerful they brought it into the DVD that you can see that deals with that. And then how does God use suffering for our good? Here's the good news. Don't you think about suffering, pain and suffering? Christianity faces it head on. It doesn't pretend it's not there. It doesn't say, oh, well. It says there is suffering. It's something we can expect in this world. But it's also got a solution. And there's no other worldview that can come close to the Christian view of pain and suffering. So I'm just curious, have you talked to anybody either who has questioned their faith because of pain and suffering, or you've gone through something tremendously upsetting, you've come out the other side because you're here, and you didn't lose your faith? Anything like that you want to share?
Definitely.
Yeah?
I suffer from chronic migraine, and a few years back I lost my ability to work a full-time job, and then at the same time we were going through some stuff, and there was just a lot of stuff that happened at once. My parents disowned me for being a Christian.
Oh.
There was just like so many things that happened, and at that time I started thinking I was cursed, that God didn't love me anymore. But I knew God's character enough, it kept carrying me through, like, well, if he died for me on the cross, this doesn't line up. So I kept knowing it was like lies from the enemy, but I still had to wrestle with it.
Sure.
And when I came out the other side, my faith was much stronger.
Yeah.
So,
Good. Other things that you dealt with or you've had friends deal with? Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, many, many years ago, I lost my little girl. And for many years, I yelled at God, I screamed at God, I blamed God, I walked away from God. I said, how can you do this to me? How can you do this to this beautiful little child? How can you do this? And after literally, gosh, it was a long time. It was many years. One day I was sitting out back in my yard. I felt this presence and it said, are you done? And I said, yes, I am. Now, do I understand? And again, just like you said, through that suffering, I came out on the other side closer to God.
Yeah.
Was it hard? Oh, you bet.
Sure.
Was it difficult? Yeah.
Yeah. So there are these stories, aren't there, that we can all share. Let's do this. I do a separate talk on the problem of pain and evil and suffering. You can go to my website, apologeticsforlife.org, and you can see the whole thing. So I'm just going to breeze through this really quickly because there's more to cover tonight. But some responses to suffering. You start and you take a look at Job's story. You know where I'm going with this in the Old Testament? He has everything taken away from him. He's lying there, he's scraped up, he's got boils, he's a mess. He's lost family, he's lost wealth, he's lost his health. And he's railing at God, like you were talking about. And basically God says, are you done? And he comes to him and he says, let me ask you something, Job. And what kind of response, or what kind of questions does God give to Job? Does he say, I know you got questions, let me give you all the answers? That doesn't happen at all, does it? He says, he asks you questions, Job, let me ask, bro, you're Joe, here we go. Were you there when I created the Pleiades and the stars and stuff like that? You know what's going on, Joe? Basically, Joe said, not really. No. Now, what's the point of that? That God's ways are here and our ways are here. And I've heard some philosophers say it's a dumb argument, and frankly, atheists are starting to walk away from it to say, well, I'm an atheist, and I can't see any reason for pain and suffering, whether it's the loss of a child or your parents dumping on you. Whatever. I can't see any reason for that to happen. Therefore, there can't be a God. And now philosophers are saying that's a bad argument. There could be things that God thinks of and plans and has on His agenda that we're puny. We don't know. How do you deal with the God of the Bible? He's so much bigger and different dimensions and all. And so it's not much of an argument to say, well, because I can't figure it out, as sharp as I am, and I must be able to figure out God, so therefore there is no God, or He doesn't care about us. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, no.
One of the aspects of Job's story that I often think about is when, at the beginning, Satan was talking with God about Job and saying, look at this guy, he has a maid, and then God grants Satan, I guess, the ability to torment Job. And I'm wondering, does Satan have a conversation with God about us in the same kind of way? I don't know, but I
I
wonder.
don't know either. I'm kind of hoping I'm off his agenda. I don't want to go through that. Oh, wow.
I'd like to not be a Jobian demonstration myself.
What's that?
I'd like to not be a Jobian
Yeah,
demonstration
exactly.
myself.
Don't you love it when his friends come and they're, quote, his friends, and they spend their whole time ragging on him, saying, get your act together, Job. You got to have done something, otherwise God wouldn't do this to you. And Job said, I didn't do anything. They were better off if they just shut up and just sat down with him, which they did at first. They just sat there. That was good friendship. But once they start picking on him, it's all over with. We can blame some of the suffering, can't we, on the fall? I mean, it wrecked us as individuals. It wrecked our relationship with each other. It wrecked the relationship with God. It wrecked our relationship with nature. Messed up nature. It says nature's still crying. It's chaos that was created. So we can say, yeah, that's what we're in a fallen world. We're in a broken world. That's what we expect. That's why Christianity is such a good answer to this. Pain and suffering is really humbling, isn't it? I don't know about you. I was thinking I've got my life under control. Everything's going to be dandy.
Yeah.
And I went through a period of some depression years back. And I thought, what's going on? I should be able to handle this kind of stuff. But it's like, oh, I guess you don't always have the steering wheel of life. God's the one that takes care of things. So it's like, really? You think you're going to run everything the rest of your life? No, not exactly. I think Paul talks about this. We suffer so that we can offer sympathy and help to others who've suffered, especially if they suffer the same kinds of things: loss of a spouse, loss of a child, problems with dealing with parents. I mean, that kind of stuff, you start associating with other people and you can feel that kind of compassion that comes out. C.S. Lewis said, God speaks to us in His Word and all, but He shouts to us in our pain. Right? He says pain is kind of like a megaphone for a deaf world. It's like, hello, oh. And for the first time, maybe in some time, people will turn to God when they're really dealing with tough times. So it's kind of a wake-up call, shaking us awake. It's also a result of free will, isn't it? God He's not turned us into robots. He hasn't cranked us up and made us say, I love you, God, and I will be a good person, right? It doesn't happen that way. We have free will, and unfortunately people, because we're broken, we're going to often choose to harm each other and harm ourselves. And then finally, Paul talks about this, it builds character. Yeah, Paul?
And when we suffer because of our own dumb choices, it doesn't make a lot of sense to blame God.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And then Paul talks about this as it building character, perseverance and hope, and eventually you get a better character out of it if you get through this situation that you're dealing with. Anyway, like I said, this is really a quick view of it, and I've got much more material.
Just one thing, I think the fact that there is so much suffering, you realize how fortunate you are to not have, and put you close and say, why am I so fortunate that these things haven't happened? And I think it brings you closer.
Yeah.
Because of the suffering, you realize, I am so lucky.
Yeah, that's right. So that's trigger number one. Yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, the other thing about suffering, what I talk to people about, is the ripple effect. And again, that has to do with humility. We don't know what the answer is, and there's no greater evil that's gonna occur than what happened tomorrow, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
However, what was the good that came from that? And in the Joseph story, Joseph, when he confronts his brothers, he says, what you meant for evil,
Yeah,
God meant for good.
yeah.
We don't understand the ripple effects of all of these actions, of
That's
all
right.
of these sufferings, of everything that goes on.
Yep,
There's something greater than us, there's something bigger than us.
yeah,
We humble ourselves to that greatness of God
sure.
and allow Him to take control.
Yeah.
We have to understand that.
Yeah, good point. So trigger number two, here's another thing that people are saying, I'm walking away because of doubt. I'm not sure I believe it all. But guess what? People in the Bible said the same thing. Here's David, how long are you going to forget me? Forever? Habakkuk, how long, O Lord, must I call for help? You don't seem to listen. I'm not getting through. It feels like just a door that's up there. In Mark, you got the disciples. They've been with Jesus. They know the power that he's got. They know the amazing capability of him. And they say, don't you care if we drown? About loss of faith there, a little bit of doubt. Jesus can handle our doubts. That's not going to be a problem for him. Great Christians have had doubts. And welcome to the world. So have we. Everybody's got doubts. So what helps you? Again, I'd like to hear from you. What helps you deal with doubts? It's not like if you get a doubt. We're going to have doubts because, again, we're limited in knowledge. How do we deal with that?
For me, it was understanding the contrast of God's character with a lie. So, because if I had to know the word, obviously, to understand God's character, because a lot of times people say in the Old Testament, oh, God was so mean, but if you truly read the Old Testament, God was really, really patient, I think. And like a lot of times we forget how long-suffering he truly is. And when you are familiar with that, it's when the lies come and you start buying into it and then the truth refutes it, and you're having that argument in your head, you're like, well, clearly this is not true. So
you match it, you match it with what you already know about the character of God.
Yeah.
Which you get by reading the Bible, strangely enough. Yeah.
What comforts me is John 6:37. All those who the Father gives to me will come to me, and I will not cast you out. I will not cast you out. Come to me.
Yeah.
No matter what state you're in, come to Jesus. I will not cast you out.
Yeah.
That's so comforting.
Yeah. Sure.
I was
Mark?
thinking along the line of the fact that people, and myself included, who have had doubts, it's been based on legalism that the church has imposed, or indirectly, or directly or indirectly, really, but I have a legalistic approach to who God is. And then when things don't add up, I begin to doubt,
Yeah.
and I've come to learn Habakkuk, he has this argument with God, and we have that Jesus can handle our doubts. But if we're doubting, how do we have that courage to even, or the thought to even take it to God?
Yeah.
And lay it on the line with Him.
Yeah. But all through the Old Testament, people were railing against God, even some of his favorite people. How come you're not listening? So, he's there, he's interested, he never casts people out because they have those doubts. And look at the disciples, for heaven's sakes. What they do when he dies, they scatter. And, so he took them back after that. Good thing. Yeah. Oh,
Lord, help me with my unbelief.
yeah. Yeah. The whole statement that he says, I do believe, but help me with my unbelief. There's always going to be a little corner there someplace, isn't it? Again, we're dealing with something that's out of our life understanding, this being that's out there. It's just hard to comprehend. Right?
Yeah, I had to remember in the time of suffering that God didn't actually owe me anything.
Amen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, some doubt, if it's intellectual doubt, there are tons of good answers, aren't there? Plenty of good books and articles and websites and things like that. Maybe if you're in a small group, you feel comfortable enough to actually share doubts. Because many times you're gonna see people nodding their heads in that small group, say, me too. You know, I've dealt with it as well. So having others, I think, in your life can make a difference. See?
Yeah, after Jesus rises from the dead, as he's going to give the Great Commission, it says, when they saw him, talking about the disciples, they worshiped him, but some doubted.
Some doubted.
28:17.
And I think that's one of the greatest lines, because it tells you how realistic the Bible is. That would never be in there. If you're making up a story, you're not going to put that some doubted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a
Especially
great-
after the resurrection. I mean, there he is right in front of them, and
Yeah.
they're still doubting. It's like,
Yeah,
Dead men don't rise.
yeah.
Gary, would you say doubting and lack of faith are the same or different?
I think they're different. Let me think about that one. But anyway, go ahead.
And I'm just reading Mere Christianity, you talked in one chapter about doubts, saying too many people are relying, concerned about their doubts of faith, but it's really based on, they just don't feel God. And so he was writing that being with God and walking with God is too often associated with feelings.
Hmm.
And people mix that up quite often as, I just doubt God even is there. It's
Yeah.
really based on the feelings. He stressed, just keep doing, just remain, just do it.
Yeah,
Just walk in obedience to his commands.
yeah. You have thoughts on that? Yeah, Al?
I think each doubt is unique. A lack of faith is when you lack the belief in God and Jesus or the truth of the Bible. And that's not so much a doubt as it is, I mean, you are doubting, so you can class it as a doubt. But that's where your lack of faith comes in. Because there's a number of things that I really doubt,
Yeah,
but I believe God, and I believe in Jesus, and I believe in the Bible.
yeah.
Doesn't mean I understand them and I have doubts about what the pastor's telling me or how I'm understanding the Bible or any number of things.
That's an interesting way to put it. Maybe that's a good idea, that doubts are particular issues that we think of, you know, do I trust the New Testament or things like that. Like, the faith is maybe your overall view of, like you said, God or Jesus, things like that. Got to keep moving here. Here's another one that people were really upset at, and you know where I'm going to go with this. It starts with Trump. But they said, some people, it was the 2016 election, they saw what happened, and they said Christians got on board with Trump and shown that he was a philanderer and he was a pretty terrible individual and a liar and this and that. And they said, really? The Christian church has gotten behind this guy? Because evangelicals did vote pretty big time for Donald Trump. And then there's this thing called Christian nationalism. And I might have mentioned this before. I want to do a talk on this someday. Because if you vote a certain way, you get accused of being what they call Christian nationalists, which means you want to impose Christianity on everybody, keep the women pregnant in the kitchen, and you know, all these terrible things. You ever read The Handmaid's Tale? There's a book that had that idea. White supremacy. It's all about being white. People support Trump, but they're no good either, and they say, well, yeah, I think it's important to have good morals, but I'm going to vote for Trump, even though he has terrible morals. Right? So you hear that kind of stuff going on a lot. Again, we don't want to turn this into a political comment too much tonight, but do you have any thoughts about that as far as, maybe you've heard people say things like that. How can you vote for a guy like Trump? You heard anything like that?
God has used some mighty decrepit, downright evil people in the Old Testament, like Cyrus.
Yeah. Persian? Yeah.
He used Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
You can't get much more reprobate than those guys.
Yeah.
I would ask, what politician isn't? So, because like, honestly, I've not seen a politician in the last 20 or 30 years that was upright in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So,
So it's maybe an unfair picture that
no,
they're
yeah, they're it's
saying it's
slanted.
only Trump, whereas the others have their own issues, huh?
I was just thinking, like when I voted for him, but it was based on the fact that he was supportive of Christianity and the beliefs I have as far as, he was supporting it. I don't know if he really believes it, because I don't have that interaction with him personally. But I know that he's defending those things that are really important to us, so.
I think the politics kind of come out of our faith. I hope they do, our Christian faith. And we think that's important, so we look for people that will support those kinds of things. But, yeah, I mean, I get it. I can understand why people do get upset.
Yeah, one of my responses to that, as far as politics is concerned, is if you compare, the Republican platform with the Democrat platform and the policies on both sides, the Democrats have a lot to be concerned about because, they're pro-abortion, they're pro-liberal policies that go against migraine. And so the alternative, Trump versus, Hillary, Trump comes out on top all the time in that situation.
Yeah. But as I said, you're not voting for a pope. Right? Right.
But again, when you put all of these labels on, what you're forgetting is the basis of what this is. It is spiritual warfare. Amen. Period. You can label it Christianity, but what is, quote, Christianity? What are they against? They're against the Christian faith. What is white supremacy against? It is against the Christian faith. It is spiritual warfare couched in the language of the devil. The devil's the one who's putting those out. He is putting those words out. It is all spiritual warfare, and we need to understand that. And we need to approach it from that point of view versus trying to argue politics with people, because that's not going to go anywhere. But when you start talking about the spiritual aspect that's involved, then you can get a hold of something.
So what you're talking about, which I think makes sense, is that we've got a worldview issue here.
Yes.
You got the secular view of who are people, what are we, what's our background, where do we come from, we've got problems, how do we fix the problems, and then you match that to the Christian worldview. Very different look at where we came from as humans, what our problem is, what the solution is. Right? Two different ways of approaching things. So it doesn't matter what you label, Kamala or Trump or Hillary or whoever, you're right, they're going to fit in one of those two worldviews pretty clearly. It's hard to have your feet in both camps. I don't think it's going to work. So, yeah, we kind of get accused, I think, unfairly, saying, oh, you don't like a woman running for president. We're talking worldviews here. Who's representing what worldviews? Okay, so I'll keep moving, if that's all right. It's really unfair, isn't it, to target Christians because they tend to, probably many would vote conservative. They're not necessarily backing Trump because they think he's a wonderful guy. They're like you said, Don, you see a list of things that he believes in or looking at their platforms and you're voting that way as a conservative. I wanted to share with you because Michael already brought it up. I told you there's a Douglas Groothuis article on his website. I don't remember, did I give you the link? I think I did. Yeah. Okay. So you look it up, you have to type in a little search bar there, type in a cheat sheet on conservatives and liberals on values and issues. So this is what comes up, and I'm not going to read it all, it's too much here, but I'll just read a couple of areas so you can see. I think he's being fair to show you that what we're really talking about are those two worldviews, two ways of seeing things. So, number one, conservatives want to preserve American ideals found in the Declaration and the Constitution. Liberals want to, quote, fundamentally transform America. Those words were from Barack Obama, through politics. So right out, you see the word conservative means to conserve. We think there's some good things that have happened. We're not going to throw it all out and start all over. Number two, conservatives believe America is basically good and self-reforming. Abraham Lincoln said, America is the almost chosen nation. Conservatives are not afraid of American exceptionalism. Liberals believe America is deeply flawed and must be discredited and transformed since its origins lie in black slavery and other issues. Remember there was that 1619 project? Did I get the right date?
Yes.
1690. So they don't see America, I say they, okay, the liberal view is not that America started in 1776 with that spark about freedom and equality and endowed by the Creator. They say America was based on slavery. So let's go back to 1619, the first slaves that came here. So they paint a very dark picture of American history. It's nothing but slavery. It's nothing but oppression of people. It's nothing but imperialism. And the other side is seeing something slightly different. So you might find that interesting here. And I don't think he's attacking the side. He's just saying generally these are the two camps that you can see as you look at conservatives.
Could you read the title again?
Yeah, I sent you guys that, I think, but it's called a cheat sheet on conservatives and liberals. If you just type that in, you can find it there. But it's really, I think, very helpful to look at. Alan?
I'd like to point out, if you get into that 1619, you find out that the first slave ship did arrive in 1619. But what they don't tell you is what happened to those slaves in that ship. The colonists arrested all the command crew of the ship and tried them, and at the colony's expense, sent all the slaves home.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. Huh. By the way, there's Christians who got rid of slavery in England and finally came over here, wasn't it?
Yeah.
William Wilberforce and others. Yeah, so we still have slavery in the world today. And it was Christianity that said this is not right, and they based it on the Bible. They didn't base it on just William Wilberforce having some good ideas. I mean, they took it from the Bible. Anyway, so we'll move on. Here's another trigger. They call it the purity culture. People are upset. They think somebody who's lost her or his virginity, that you put a bunch of shame on them and you treat them terribly in church, give them a huge guilt trip. The sex instructions, they said, for the women that talked about walking away, they said, when I was a kid, I was taught body is bad. You got to keep it subdued all the time, and boys are dangerous because they only want one thing. And so there's this real negative view of sex and, you know, growing up and becoming more mature.
Having 2 daughters, I can tell you boys are dangerous though.
Yeah.
Just a comment, it seems to me I hear a lot of news today about how toxic men are from the liberal
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
So
Toxic
things have
masculinity.
turned around a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of guys, I mean, because I teach in college, I like to read things that are dealing with college. A lot of guys are not going to college because, not the first and most primary reason, but one reason is they're tired of being browbeaten for being guys and being told they're the problem. They're all dangerous, right? It's toxic masculinity, not just a few guys that are, you know, doing some terrible things. It's the general element, the entire group. After all, it's guys that are part of this whole critical theory idea that we divide society into oppressors and the oppressed. And guess what side the guys are on? We're all oppressors, right? So, yeah.
But again, it's all spiritual in nature. I mean,
Yeah.
if in fact we talk about women and women need to go out, well, what have been the results of that? Well, in the black community, the illegitimate birth rate is 80%. In the Hispanic community, it's 60%. In the white community, it's 45% now that are unwed mothers and fathers. God's order.
Yeah.
What is that all about? It is a spiritual tearing down of the order of God.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Well, again, either God is or God isn't.
Yeah.
That's your choices.
Yeah.
That's your choices. And again, everything that you want to put in all of these is all spiritual in nature.
What do they say? Ideas have consequences.
Yes.
So if there's a God, there's going to be a different way of living, and
Right.
if there's no God, there's going to be a different way of living. Actually, if you really think about it, and I'm going to add one more note here. Oop, right at the very bottom. Nancy Pearcey, terrific author and thinker, and she was one of those I told you who was at L'Abri and spent time there under Francis Schaeffer. She's written several books. Love Thy Body is one, and I forgot what the other one is called, but she deals with this in a book level rather than just 5 minutes here in class. And she talks about it's not Christianity that has decided your body is a bad thing. What are we hearing today? Let's just take transgenderism. What's it saying? Your body tells you you're male or you're female. Don't trust it. Don't listen to it. Go with what you think. Right? Ignore the cells that make you up. Right? Ignore that stuff. That's wrong. And the hookup culture says your body isn't anything. It's just meant to get together with somebody else and have a few moments of sex, and just it doesn't matter. It's no big deal. Well, they found over and over again when people have that sexual connection, there's all sorts of chemicals and stuff that happens that tries to unite those two people in a tight spiritual relationship. But if you're doing hookups, you're completely breaking those bonds every time, and you're scarring people psychologically. And they're finding this out. Duh. You know, it seems pretty obvious. But anyway, it's the modern culture that says don't trust the body, don't pay any attention to the body, it's no big deal. It's think, and that's who you are, right? So everything's it's the thought stuff, which Steve talked about last time. Trigger 5. Here are some other issues people deal with. Oh, come on, you sit around and read the Bible? It's out of date, it's contradictory, it's immoral, you got God slaughtering generations of people, you know, they call that genocide. He's going after the people in Canaan, wiping them out, right and left. There's Jephthah, who sacrifices his daughter. Do you remember that story? He makes an oath to God. First person I see, I'll sacrifice to you so that we will get our nation okay. And he sees his daughter first. So they'll pick out stories from especially the Old Testament and things like this. And I'm just curious, what's your response? The Bible is under attack. It's always been under attack, but it's pretty strong these days. God's a bully.
I
God
would
doesn't want
say,
you to have fun.
have you read it from front to back? And most of the time they try to say, yeah. Well, I'm like, well, would you know that that story is out of context? And well, what do you mean by that? You know, and then you go deeper into it. And,
Yeah.
But a lot of times you have to know the word to be able to do that with people. And then on the other part of it, where they say it's archaic and contradictory and immoral, show me.
Yeah.
Show me. Because archaic, like, to me, the Bible's more relevant today than it was, 500 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love the contradictions. Somebody always comes up with that. And you're right, just say, show me one. Well, there were 2 angels at the tomb, where Jesus was, and another book says 1 angel. But you could have 2, but some person just says there's 1. They don't say there's only 1 or there are 2. I think there's a lot of ways to deal with those contradictions that are there. How about genocide? That's become popular in the last 10 or 15 years. God is a genocidal bully.
There's a good book, I think Paul Copan or somebody like that, wrote a book about, is God a moral monster? And he lays out the evidence in the Old Testament that it's not exactly what it's describing, to our Western eyes.
Yeah.
So he makes a good case that God is not a moral monster.
Yeah, there's no genocide that went on there. Shoot, God was pretty tough on the people of Israel, right? He was after sin. He wasn't after a skin color or a particular group of people. There's a book, I'm going to mention it again, so don't worry about it right now, but remind me, I want to talk about this book called The Truth and True Crime, so we'll come back to that. Here's trigger 6, morality or toxic theology. And the book says, all of these issues are things that people will bring out. So this is kind of a bubbling cauldron. These are odds and ends, I guess. And Steve and I have talks on a lot of these. And if you're interested, we can do that in the fall if you care. But so we're not going to go through these tonight. Each one is a separate issue, isn't it? By complementarianism, you know where I'm going with that? What they're bringing up? The role of women.
That's a big word.
Yeah. There are 2 positions that Christians can take, complementarian or egalitarian, meaning women can do anything a man can do in the church, or women are restricted from, for example, being a pastor of a church. And that's torn some churches apart. And it is a big issue. So we're not touching that tonight. I'm just saying there are people who walk away based on some of these issues that come up. So, you know what we can say for a single answer for a lot of these things? God wants people to function to the best of their ability. And in many cases, things you get into here, all these things we've been talking about, you're ruining your ability to function the best possible. God wants the best for people. And so things like same-sex marriage, that's not a good way for people to live. Homosexuality is a terrible lifestyle. Transgenderism is terrible for people. They've got mental issues, and now you do things to their body, you made it worse. They don't get better as a result of messing with the body. They've given up doing same-sex surgeries at Johns Hopkins University. The guy there said, we weren't making a difference. In fact, they were just as miserable afterwards because they had all sorts of other issues going on at the same time. And so then we took these people who said, I don't feel like I'm the right person in the right body, and we changed them and said, ta-da, and they said, I still don't feel right, it still doesn't work right. So it's kind of like taking somebody who's anorexic and they say to you, I feel like I'm too fat, and you'd say, yeah, you're too fat, keep dieting. You don't say that to somebody. You say, you got a problem here, it's not your body's okay, you gotta take care of that. Or somebody says to you, I'm feeling suicidal, you don't say, go ahead. Do what you feel like. You be you. Right? You don't do that. You say, let's get you some help because there's something wrong. Anyway, so we want what's best for people to flourish. Here's one more. They said, abuse in the church. Does that strike you as kind of vague? Does that just mean they got offended because somebody said something to them, or do they mean actual sexual attacks in the church? Kind of hard to say there. Have you ever heard anybody mention that they were abused in the church?
No.
Catholic Church.
Catholic Church?
And there's a lot of stories and documented cases.
In what sense? That there was like sexual abuse? Okay, and then the priest didn't do anything about it? Okay.
Well, sometimes the priests are the ones who miss it.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
In the Native Americans now, we've had Canada and the US, and how they treated Native American kids, forcing them to go to schools, usually Catholic, and then they were mistreated, sometimes even killed there.
Yeah.
Just buried, now they find those graves.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know of more than a handful of stories of girls who were mistreated. And unfortunately, it does happen when they go to the church elders and it gets swept under the rug.
Yeah.
And it's a very ugly thing within the church, but I think, I think the first week you talked about, does the church ever need reform? And I think that is one of those things that we need to stop keeping secrets. I think we need to expose the sin and let it play out.
Yeah.
And so.
But remember when there was that Me Too movement that got really popular? Well, there were Christian women that also set up some form of that as far as church reform, which I think that was good to see. But Christianity doesn't argue for that kind of lifestyle. I mean, if that's going on, that's contrary to Christian beliefs.
Right.
And so there's verses there, we won't take the time. And we're dealing with fallen people again. We're back to that issue again. That's not what God intends. God's heart is with us, more verses down there. And abuse can be subjective. Right, so there's that as well. So what's the conclusion of that chapter? I think one sentence. Deconstruction is not inevitable. You don't have to walk away because there are answers to these things, and that's what we're just kind of playing with tonight. We're just skating on the surface. So here's chapter 6. This is the one called The Upper Story. That's Francis Schaeffer. There's even a series, video series, it's pretty old now, that he did, but he was really, really popular for quite a while. As it says, they're pastor, evangelist, apologist, and prophet.
Prophet.
Yeah, from about 30 years ago, he forecast things that where society was going. He's really nailed it. So here's the problem. We'll get back to Schaeffer in just a second. It's really hard in this current generation to talk to people about truth, because we say Christianity is true, and they nod, but they have a whole different idea of what we mean by truth. So most of us grew up with this idea of truth. You hear somebody say it's raining and you walk outside and you see people walking around with umbrellas and you're getting wet and their umbrellas are wet and people are sloshing through puddles. You think, the person that said it was raining is right, that's truth, because you're calling it a correspondence, right? That the statement matches up with reality. You look out the window, yep, it's raining. But that's the old theory. That's the one that, I don't know about you, I grew up on that theory. I had no idea there was a different theory. I thought truth is, you say it and it either is so or it's not so. It's true. That's objective. In other words, you're looking out at an object, in this case rain or whatever it is, and you say, it's not based on your beliefs, it's not, I think it's, I feel like it ought to be raining. That's not what we're talking about here. Truth lies in the object that you're talking about, your bank account. You either know the amount, maybe you don't, but you know the amount that's in there, and that either matches up with the amount or you got it wrong, and the bank's off on a different number than you've got. Now, you know your dog, a car you drive, you look at the moon. I mean, all those things are out there beyond us, and we say that's truthful or it's not truthful. If you say you have a dog and you don't, people can look in your yard. It's out there or it's not there. And it's true for everybody. Oh, but things have changed. Where are we today? You get to decide what's true. It's inside you. not out there. So it's called a subject, you're the subject, so you get to determine. So it's your taste, it's your preference, it's kind of like ice cream. You know, you like strawberry and I like vanilla. We don't sit there and, I wouldn't say you're wrong because you like strawberry. We just say, oh, okay, I don't like strawberry, I like vanilla. And you just go on your merry way. So it's the true for you, but not for me kind of approach. And there's a problem with that statement. So I want to share something with you for a minute. There's such a thing as a statement that's self-defeating, or sometimes called self-refuting. And I'll give you 3 examples, and then we'll go to another 4 in just a second. Somebody walks up to you and says, I can't speak a word of English. That statement just nullified itself, didn't it? They just shot themselves in the foot there. You are so judgmental. By the way, a lot of Christians get accused of this, yes? What did they just do when they said that? They judged you. Or number 3, no English sentence is more than 5 words long. Well, that doesn't add up. Well, now let's move it over to the area of truth. All truth is relative. Do you see the problem?
That's true.
They just made a statement that they say applies everywhere, to everybody. But that's not their belief. Their belief is that truth is actually inside you, but they just made a statement about everybody. That's a contradictory statement. So that's self-refuting. It's logically doesn't work. It's illogical. So let's go back to Schaeffer for just a minute here. He said, he noticed that ever since the Enlightenment, and he said it's been happening faster and faster, he said we're starting to come up with a different theory of truth. And what he meant by that was, he called it a two-story idea of truth. He said, so picture a two-story building. He said down in the bottom floor, people have science and facts and bank accounts and miles per gallon they're getting with their car. You know, it's all that stuff that we say that's real, that's true. I see it, I understand it, I can weigh it, I can measure it, I can do all this stuff with it. But your personal and your likes and your dislikes and your feelings and your attitudes are in a different story. They're up in the top story there. So he said that's what people are starting to say, that your personal beliefs are here and reality is down here. The world is down here and your beliefs are up here because they won't often match. Well, so what do we do? What do we do when we talk to somebody and we say, I think Christianity is true? What are they thinking? Your upper story. You're telling how you feel. You're telling about how it's helped you. You're telling about your friends. You're telling about loving God. And they're thinking, yeah, but that's not the bottom floor. That's not reality. That's not truth. That's not facts. It's you're living in this almost like a dream world. So that's what they're going to hear if you talk to people. They're going to think, well, that's true for you. Why are they saying it's true for you? Because it's your top story. You're living there. Your Christianity is there. Is that what we say? Is that what we mean by Christianity? No, we think it is not subjectively true. We think it's objectively true. Why? Because it corresponds to reality. I've heard Greg Kokel say that more than once. I know Steve has too. He says, I'm a Christian. I believe Christianity is true because it's the closest match to the way the world really works. It's the closest match to the way we are designed. And it's the closest match to evil being out there, all sorts of things. Christianity does that far better job than something like Hinduism. Hinduism says evil is just a illusion. There's no real evil. It's just an illusion. Really? You look around the world today, how do you live that? Jim Wallace, I love Jim Wallace. We'll get to him in just a second. He's that guy who grew up as an atheist, became a detective, cold case detective, and he was an atheist for a long time, had kids, and he changed. But he said, I'm not a Christian because it works for me. I had a life prior to Christianity, it seemed to be working just fine. He had a job, good job, had a wife, wonderful wife, a couple of kids. And he says, my life as a Christian hasn't always been easy. In fact, he's given up some easiness for something a little more difficult. He says, I'm a Christian because it's true. I'm a Christian because my high regard for the truth leaves me no alternative. That should be our view as well. Yeah. That we're in that camp, not because of wishful thinking, not a leap in the dark, because we got the resurrection coming up. I mean, we better have some reasons that the resurrection really happened. We do. We're not going to get into that tonight, but we do. Think about Jesus. How many times did he reference the idea of truth? More than once, didn't he? He says, I'm the way. He didn't say I'm a way to God. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. Paul said something kind of like that when he was talking about the resurrection. He said, you can philosophize if you want, but he said, it all comes down to the resurrection. If he's not raised, we are wasting our time. It's silly. We're just standing around singing happy songs and talking to each other. And he says your faith is vain. So the resurrection is the keystone to Christianity, isn't it? So I hope you hear some messages in the next couple of days, or you pick up something. There's some great books on the story of the resurrection, why we can trust that it happened. It's not just wishful thinking. It's not second story. It's bottom story reality. So we can't talk to people and assume that we're on the same wavelength. You know, they'll think that we're talking second story, and we've got to convince them. We've got to bring it down to the bottom story to say, no, it's actually true. You went back 2,000 years, you would have seen that stone roll away. You would have seen Jesus walk out. And frankly, we can be objective about religions. People always say, oh, religion's so subjective. No, it's not. Every religion makes all sorts of claims. I didn't have time, but just take a look at a couple of these. Hindus say there was no beginning to the universe. It's always been here. Did they get that right?
Nope.
Not according to modern science. In fact, modern science backs up Genesis really well, doesn't it? At one time, there was nothing, and then there was something. How do you get matter, space, time, and energy into existence? It's got to be something outside of that that brought it into existence. What do you call that? Well, it's super nature, it's supernatural. So you make a good case there. The APA says the claims of Scientology haven't been supported by empirical evidence. Duh. Right? They've been sued. They've gone to court, and the judges always say there's no evidence for it. It's a con. It's a moneymaker. It's a scheme. Have you seen some of the results of people who spend fortunes on Scientology? It's awful. How about Latter-day Saints? How's their history done?
Book of
Yeah,
Mormon.
Book of Mormon. Can you find any of those places out here in the Americas? Zero. They've never found a bit of evidence. You'd think you'd walk away from that faith immediately, but that's upper story. To me, the Mormons are in the upper story. Because they got nothing on the bottom that's part of reality. The Quran, they've got a huge problem with their manuscripts. There was a caliph who came along shortly after Muhammad died, and they were hearing all of these various things. Well, did Muhammad say this? No, he said that. No, he said something else. So they got all these things that are confusing. So he just collected the Qurans and threw them all away and kept one. He said, this will be the official one. How did he know? So there's a lot of questioning about the early days of Islam. But I mean, it's just one example of going to that bottom floor and seeing how religions match up. We can do that with all sorts of religions. Mary Baker Eddy, no good. People that started such Christian Science. Jehovah's Witnesses, you ever read about their founders? Okay, so you can look at these things and make some decisions there. Well, how long have we been having to deal with these subjective truth claims? Go back to Genesis. Did God really say that? Don't you feel differently? Don't you want certain things? And all of a sudden, there we go. We got the fall. Truth is within. That's what Steve was talking about last week. You don't want external stuff because that might put a demand on you. So where do you get your authority? Here. Right? So you get to be the authority. So, deconstruction, right? We've already talked about it briefly, but it goes for that two-story concept. It's all about preferences, how you feel. It's not about the truth. There's no particular conclusion that you're reaching, and you can become anything you want. Well, except for Christianity. Right? So keep that out. But you're your own authority. You do you. Steve had that Disney bit. Wasn't that good?
Follow your heart.
Follow your heart. Said over and over again, movie after movie. That's pretty powerful. So where do we get our authority? The Bible. Jesus affirmed it, and we see it in our lives. Just because of time, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I mean, just look at some of the things that the authority of God outside of us, look what that does for people. These are just some of the values. I would say these are all things people would like to have. We've got such an angry, upset world today because they don't have these things in their lives. Because they're saying the truth lies here. Well, if it does, good luck trying to get all those things in your life. There's going to be a massive unhappiness out there. We've got drug use much more so than in the past. People are much more on tranquilizers and uppers and downers. I mean, just all sorts of things. So I mentioned this book by J. Warner Wallace. It ties in really well with what we're talking about tonight. It's called The Truth and True Crime. He makes a list, and these aren't all of them, so I'm like ... but he makes a list of the things that people want in their lives. Would you agree that these things down here would give a really terrific life? Things like something worthy, humility, contentment, purpose, on and on and on. He shows in every chapter how it's the Bible, and actually modern research shows that it's biblical answers that create these parts of our lives that everybody would like to have. You don't get those away from the Bible. So this is a good book, really enjoyable book. J. Warner Wallace.
Yeah. In his recent talks, he mentions that it's no longer enough to say that the Bible is true, but you can argue that it is true. But he is now saying with this new book, Christianity is good.
Yes.
It's beneficial,
That's
not
a good
just
point.
true. It's both true and beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy. I think it's easy to win the case for the truth of Christianity, but it's harder because people will say, I don't care if it's, don't give me manuscript evidence. I don't want manuscript. I think Christianity is bad. I mean, look at the things we had up here on the screen tonight. All these things that the bad results of Christianity. But this is good stuff. Yeah, it's kind of a switch for Wallace because he was more apologetics oriented. And this is a different kind of apologetics. Why should you want Christianity? And if you want it, it's true, right? It's kind of a two-step thing there. So I really like that book. I would highly recommend it. He's got a video series that deals with it. And every chapter covers one of these things. And he tells, are you surprised? He tells crime stories in every chapter. And then the crime story leads to the point that he wants to make. And he does research. This is not just him second story thinking. I mean, he's actually doing research. He's found out what sociological studies are coming up with. That these things come about because of the Christian worldview.